بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على نبينا محمد وأهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. In the last week, we were describing the rights of brotherhood, which was defending the rights of your brother when someone is backbiting against him. And we discussed about what backbiting is and the punishments for backbiting and many things dealing with that. And then we got to the part where it said, who is it forbidden to backbite against? We had narration from Imam Sadiq alayhi salam that says, the one who deals with the people and doesn't commit excess upon them, talks to them and he doesn't lie, he makes a promise with them and he doesn't break it. He is the one who's slandering and backbiting. It is prohibited. His forbearance and fortitude is completed. His justice and equity is exhibited and evident. His brotherhood is binding and obligatory upon other people. So the person who has this characteristics, he is our brother and is forbidden to backbite against him. And we always have to think about the best for our brothers and sisters in Islam. And if we only, we had to talk about just the good qualities that people had instead of focusing on negative things. We mentioned that if we have a blank piece of paper and there's one black dot on that paper, that people will focus on that thing instead of looking at the rest of the paper. And the same is with people. They focus on the negative that they find and they overlook all of the other good qualities that they have, and they only focus on that one negative thing that they found on that person. So this is what we covered in the last week, and now we got to the part where we mentioned it briefly before, that in some cases, criticizing others is like termed as a permissible type of backbiting. So the first instance with this is backbiting of a person whose defect is not hidden and it's known to everybody, like the one who roams the streets and they drink wine openly. We find in one of the books of fiqh, famous book Al-Maqasid, narration that says, one who sins openly is not worthy of respect and his backbiting is not forbidden. Also, another narration says the backbiting of the one who has thrown away the robe of shame and he commits sins openly. He doesn't care about what other people think about him. This is not considered as backbiting. So this type of person, he commits sins shamelessly. He doesn't care what anyone thinks of him. This type of person, it's okay to mention these things. It's not considered as backbiting. If the person has already given up the sin, then his backbiting is forbidden. So a person who used to be like this, but then he changed, we cannot backbite against him because inshallah, Allah forgave him for that sin and we cannot continue to bring it up. And he shouldn't be scolded or criticized because forbidding what is wrong, nahi anil munkar, is to take him away from that sin. If he has given the sin up already, then there's no sense in reprimanding him for something that he already gave up. And if he has not stopped doing that sin and he does it secretly, then his sin, it comes under the realm of secret sins, things that are between him and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and it's forbidden to mention them to other people. If a person, you know, has left a life of sin, they used to do a lot of haram things, and they repented to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we shouldn't keep reminding that person of their past. We shouldn't be asking them, oh, how was it when you used to go drink alcohol and go to the nightclubs? How was it when you used to, get high or sell drugs? What did it feel like? What did pork taste like when you used to eat it? Was it like the same type of bacon that we have as beef, or did it taste different? These type of questions would make, someone bothered. It would offend them. It would, make them uncomfortable and maybe even make them feel ashamed. I have a good friend who was one time, he was a Salafi and he hated the followers of Ahlul Bayt. He hated Shia. And this guy was on his way to scope out one of the masjid where one of the Shia scholars lived in order to come back later with a group of Salafis and hurt this scholar, possibly kill this scholar. However, when he came, the scholar started debating with him and proving to him why Shia believe the way they do, and it completely opened the eyes of this guy. And he had never heard this before, and he had never saw the proofs from the Quran until that moment when he showed him. And he left his hatred for Shias, and he actually became a very good believer at that very moment, and he accepted the walayat of Amir al-Mu'mineen and the A'imma alayhimus salam, and he totally changed. You know, the point in mentioning this story is that, after that, anytime people, some people were around him and they saw a group of Salafis doing something against Ahlul Bayt, they would say to him, "Oh, you remember when you used to do that?" Or if they saw a terrorist group calling people to kill the Shia, they would say to him, "Oh, so and so, remember when you used to be on the same side as them?" It's really offensive and it causes pain to that brother. And he sincerely repented and he regrets what he used to do. And this is the type of backbiting we have to stay away from. Some of these people, they don't know about Ahlul Bayt, alayhimus salam. They have no idea, or they've been told so many lies. So we need to make sure that they know the truth. They're mostly hating us because of the lies they've been told. I know one sheikh in Karbala that sometimes he's in America too, where he goes back and forth. And he said that when he was studying in Damascus in the Sunni Hausa, I guess we can call, or madrasa, they always told him that Shias have a different Quran. So he one day he went to Zainabiyya, where the Hausa was for Shia, and he started yelling at the guy, outside of the Hausa, "How dare you have a different Quran than us?" and blah blah blah. And the guy said, "Just come inside. We have a lot of Qurans in here, and you just can take them and look through them." So he was angry. He went in there and he started opening up different Qurans and looking at verses. And then he came to the conclusion that the Quran was the same. Every page he would open and look is the same. So he knew that he was lied to. So he went back to those people and said, "You lied to me. How come you told me they have a different Quran when they have the same Quran as us? What other things did you lie to me about?" So he ended up becoming Shia. And it was very interesting. His name before was Omar, and he changed his name to Ali. So it was a very interesting story. And even some of his relatives who were Salafi in Iraq, they wanted to kill him, and he didn't even care. He said, "This is the path of truth, and I know it's right." And he went on to continue studying in the Hausa. And last time I saw him a few years ago, he was still there. So, a lot of these people, they don't know. And when they find out the truth, they turn towards it. But if you remind them of their past, it's bad for them, and it humiliates them and makes them feel uncomfortable. So the second thing he mentioned is if an oppressed person complains about the oppressor and mentions his act of injustice, this is not backbiting. For example, a person is abused, whether physically or sexually or whatever, and they complain to someone that can help them. They go to the police, for example, or to someone who can help them in that situation and tell them what happened to them. This is not backbiting. Allah says in Quran, "And whoever defends himself after being oppressed, these it is against whom there is no way to blame them. The way to blame is only against those who oppress and revolt in the earth unjustly. These shall have a painful punishment." This is Surah 42, Ayat 41 and 42. Also in Surah Nisa, Ayah 148, Allah says, "Allah does not love the public utterance of hurtful speech unless," he gives exception, "unless it be by the one to whom injustice has been done to him." So precaution demands that we must complain of injustice to someone who is capable of solving that issue. It's not permitted to go and complain to someone who cannot get justice for you. It needs to be, you cannot just go and around and just tell everyone about the thing. It needs to go to the proper channels. And if we feel that someone has wronged us, then we should actually only address this with the one who can actually make a difference in solving the situation. So we shouldn't go and publicize it to everyone. Also, at sometimes we can go from being the oppressor, the oppressed, we have oppression done to us. So we can go from being madloom to dhalim. We can become the oppressor ourselves. We have to ask ourselves, how can that happen? So, for example, a person backbites against you to one person. Then you find out you want to get revenge against that person. So instead of backbiting to the extent that they have done, which was with only one person, you go to a crowd of people and you backbite against the person to everyone in that entire place. Maybe there's 100 people there. So now, in that case, that person has surpassed the sin that was done to them. And they went from being oppressed to becoming the oppressor. So we have to be careful with that also. The third exception is giving advice to those people who ask for it. So if a Muslim approaches you, asks you for advice in a particular deal, business deal, for example, that he's about to enter into with a person, he doesn't know that person too well, and you know of a defect in that person, which normally you wouldn't reveal because it's backbiting. But in this case, if you don't reveal it to him, he's going to enter into that business contract and he will suffer loss and he will encounter a lot of problems and hardships. In this case, it's permitted to pass along that information. So if someone comes to you and says, so-and-so brother wants me to invest $100,000 with them, this opportunity looks like once in a lifetime. I cannot pass it up. What do you think about it? And you know that person they are referring to is a con artist, for example, or he's known for shady business practices, then you should inform that person about him, because in that case you're protecting him and you're protecting your brother from suffering some sort of loss. So in this case, it is not backbiting. The fourth thing is backbiting of a person is allowed if, in addition to committing the sin himself, he is instrumental in instigating others to follow him. For example, he introduces an innovation in the religion. In order to warn the people of his deceit, his backbiting is permitted. So, if a person is misguiding others due to his sins, or he's leading people away from Islam by making false accusations or false claims that are rejected by the teachings of Ahlul Bayt, then it's permissible to warn others of that person. He's making false teachings, false doctrines that don't go in line with Ahlul Bayt. He's starting his own cult, for example. Some scholars have different opinions of on issues due to this because of their ijtihad. You know, uh, they have different, not on this matter, but on matters in general. They have differing opinions on certain issues. One alim says this, other alim says that. This is because of their ijtihad. And some scholars have written books refuting each other, but in a respectable way. And they both show their points on how they have come to their different conclusions. And that is fine. It's not what we're talking about here. So, if a marja has a different viewpoint than yours, it's not a cause to say that he is innovating something, not permitted in the religion. For example, Sheikh al-Mufid, a respectable alim of the past, renowned scholar, has written a book against his teacher, Sheikh al-Suduk, also renowned scholar, but in a respectable way, saying Sheikh Suduk believed this, but I have come to a different conclusion based on this, with all due respect. The same thing in Luma Damashkiya by Shahid al-Awwal. Shahid al-Thani wrote a sharh to it, and many times he is differing in opinions with Shahid al-Awwal. But Shahid al-Thani did it with respect. This is common. We see that Sayyid al-Sistani has differing opinions than his teacher, Sayyid al-Khawi. There's no problem with this. It doesn't mean they're innovating something in religion, but they have different conclusions based on their ijtihad and is done with respect. But we're not speaking about this directly. We're speaking about if someone makes claims that are against the Quran, Hadith, Ijma, consensus of the early scholars. For example, if someone now comes and claims that he is the specific representative appointed by Imam Zaman Ajallah Ta'ala Farajahu Sharif, and he is in direct communication with Imam, this would be someone that we would need to warn other people against because he is claiming things falsely. The fifth exception to backbiting is it's allowed in connection with a person who narrates false hadith or gives false testimony. It should be to ensure that people are not misled by this. And we have to expose those people who narrate false narrations to make sure that other people aren't tricked by these things and follow forged narrations. The sixth thing is it is allowed to mention the defect of a person by which he is well known. For example, he is blind, he is deaf, he is lame, these type of things. Or he has one arm, for example. But our intention in this must not be to point out the defect, to belittle him. And this person shouldn't be bothered by these titles. If he is bothered by this, then we shouldn't do it. Only in certain circumstances, it's allowed to do it. Otherwise, we should use some other indicator to point towards this person. For example, if we see the person there and the person you're talking to also sees him, and it's obvious he is blind, he has the stick and these things, instead of saying, oh, the blind person over there, we can say, oh, the person over there in the black shirt, for example, he's the only one in black shirt, we can say that. But if it's the only way to identify him, maybe it's Muharram and everyone is in black dishdasha, and we need to point out something very specific so that he knows exactly who we're talking about. Say the person there who is blind, unable to see, and this thing. Other thing that's not backbiting is to describe any fault of a patient before a physician for treatment. Medical treatment is also not backbiting. So we take our parents to the doctor and we need to describe what is going on with them and what their problem is. It is not backbiting when we're describing to the doctor in order to they get treatment. So if describing a person by their disability is the only way to convey the meaning to the person that you're talking to, then it has to be done, but with respect, with dignity, not to belittle that person. And it should never be, use a person's disability to make fun of them or belittle them. So we have to be very sensitive to this issue. Because Imam Sadiq alayhi salam says, whoever says something about his believing brother with the intention of belittling him or damaging his honor and respect in the eyes of the people, Allah will force him away from Allah's friendship and push him towards the domain of the shaitan's friendship. Also, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa said that never gloat over the misfortune of your brother, for he may be freed from it and you may be the next victim of it. So we have to be very careful on how we describe people to other individuals. The seventh one is if the life, property, or honor of someone can be protected only by informing him of some fault of someone, it won't be backbiting because something else, a secondary rule came. So the primary rule is we cannot backbite. Now, a secondary rule came, an exception. Something happened where we need to override that rule. Something more pressing happened, which they could lose their life if they get in the car with that person. They could lose their property if they go in business with this person. They could lose their honor if they're around this person who is not respectable. Then in that case, we can inform the person of the defect in order to save their life, property, or honor. So these are all circumstantial things. Depends on what's going on. So we see that these are exceptions to the rule of backbiting. It is permissible in these cases. But for backbiting in general, it is done to humiliate someone or to belittle them, and this person is not the real brother of the person. If someone is backbiting against you, they are not your real brother or sister in faith. Imam Bakr alayhi salam said, "How bad is a munafiq, a hypocrite, who has two faces and two tongues? He admires his brother in his presence, but gossips about him in his absence. He will envy his brothers if they get rich, and he will not, and they won't help him if they get in trouble." So we see that he is not the real brother of the person. Because some people, they make friends with you in order to get close to you, and then they find out all your personal matters. And once they find out the private issues in your life, they try to use these things to destroy you, ruin your life. These type of people, they are miserable people, and they only want to wreak havoc on anyone who is happy or who is successful. And these types of people, they just pretend to be your brother or sister in faith, but in reality, they are just out to ruin your life, and they don't care anything about you at all. They're very dangerous, and we always have to, we have to be careful about these type of people. If we are hearing them backbite against other people while you are there, then it means when you're not there, they are probably backbiting against you also. Imam Sadiq alayhi salam said, "A believer will never deceive his fellow believing brothers, nor oppress them, be treacherous with them, humiliate, gossip about, or grumble at his believing brothers. He will never say his believing brother is lying. He should never even complain or grumble. Their friendship will be ruined if he does this. Should he accuse him in any way, he will lose his faith in just the same manner that salt gets dissolved in water." So he is describing how we should deal with each other. And we see that a true believer would never wish any ill will towards his brother in faith, and he would never backbite against him. The seventh Imam, Imam Qadim alayhi salam, said, "And the believer is the real brother of the believer, although his parents may not have given birth to him." He says, "Cursed is the one who accuses his brother. Cursed is the one who plays trickery and treachery with his brother. Cursed is the one who does not admonish and advise his brother. And cursed is the one who backbites his brother." So we have to take note of all these evil characteristics that the Imam has mentioned, and he cursed these type of groups. And we have to strive our utmost not to acquire any of these evil qualities. And if we found that we have any of these things in ourselves, then we have to turn towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and ask his forgiveness and ask him to remove these things from our heart. We should never want to humiliate our brothers and sisters. We always should want the best for them. We should want to build them up, not tear them down. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa said it's illicit to violate anything of the believer, whether it's his honor, his wealth, and his blood. All of these are sacred. And Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam said, "Muslims are brothers. Do not disappoint each other, and do not attribute dishonor to one another." Also, Imam Sadiq alayhi salam says, "A believer's respect and honor is much more than that of the Kaaba." Subhanallah. We would never want to disrespect the Kaaba, but it is easy for us to disrespect our brother in faith. So we have to look at these narrations and remember these things when we want to talk about someone else. So we have to, we have 5 minutes, so inshallah we'll wrap up with this. He says, we have to defend the honor of our brother. So this is what the right of the believer is, defending your brother from backbiting. So we should, do more than just be mindful of the sin of backbiting ourselves, but we should also refrain from listening to backbiting. We should defend our brother and sister in faith when they are being dishonored. We wouldn't want someone to talk about us, so we shouldn't let them talk about someone else. That it's not good. We should stop them from that when they start engaging in it. One time, a person defamed and slandered someone else in the presence of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And another person there stood up and refuted him and defended his honor. The Prophet said, "Whoever defends the honor of his brother, that act will shield him from the hellfire." So this is a very highly praised act, to defend the honor of your brother or sister when they are being backbitten against. He also said, if the backbiting one if the backbiting of one's believing brother is being done in one's presence and it's possible to defend him, one must defend him, and Allah will help such a person in the hereafter. And in spite of being able, he doesn't defend him, Allah will leave him on his own in the hereafter and will not help him. It's a very serious thing. He says, if one defends his believing brother's honor while backbiting is done about him in a way that he proves his innocence, Allah will remove from him 1,000 types of evils from this world and the hereafter. But if he doesn't dispel them, he doesn't prove his innocence, in spite of being able to do so, his sin will be 70 times that of the backbiter. So it's even worse because he was able to defend him, but he didn't, and he let it continue on. His sin is worse than the backbiter. It's said that the sin of the listener is more than that of the backbiter, because if it weren't for the ones willing to listen to the backbiter, then the backbiter wouldn't have dared to backbite in the first place. He needs an audience. We should note that listening to backbiting silently without saying anything, it implies a type of support of the backbiter. We are giving him a type of audience. So, action plan at the end of this is, what should we do when we hear someone backbiting? The first thing we can do is we can present a valid excuse for the person's actions. We have husn al-dhan, good opinion of the person, and make excuses for him. The second thing we can do, if this isn't possible, we should draw the attention of the one who is backbiting that, after all, he is not a ma'soom, he's not infallible. We are prone, we maybe makes mistakes here and there, don't focus on these things. The third thing is we shouldn't forget our own sins as well. We also have many sins. We're pointing out many sins of other people, but ourselves, we have a lot of things that are wrong too. The fourth thing is, if a believer falls into sin, we should pray for his forgiveness. Instead of cursing him and damning him and throwing him out of the religion, we should ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive him and to bring him back to the path and allow him to get away from that sin, and to support him and aid him in tawbah, instead of exposing his fault and defaming him to other people. The last thing of many things we can do is that we should make him realize that his revealing of the sin of another person can be a more serious sin than the original one that's committed by, that believer. By, maybe this believer has done something wrong, but pointing out that sin and humiliating him and disrespecting him could be much more greater sin than what that person did in the first place, as we see that the respect of the believer is like the sanctity of Holy Kaaba. So when we disrespect our believing brother or sister, it is like we are attacking the Holy Kaaba. So we would never want to do that. Also, Quran says it is like eating the dead flesh of our brother. So these things are reprehensible. They are disgusting in our eyes. We would never want to do any of those things. But it is the same when we are backbiting. It is like we are doing those things. So we have to be mindful and keep in mind these things. Whenever we want to talk about someone else, remember these narrations, remember these ayat from Quran. And we have to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to save us all from this evil sin of backbiting and protect us from the harmful effects of backbiting. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us all and help us all to be more supportive and more kind to each other and become united under the banner of Muhammad and Ali Muhammad alayhi salam. And we end with the dua. ربنا اغفر لنا ولإخواننا الذين سبقونا بالإيمان ولا تجعل في قلوبنا غلا للذين آمنوا ربنا إنك رؤوف رحيم. Allah says in Surah Hashr, Lord, forgive us and our brothers who preceded us in faith, and clear out our hearts of any ill will against the believers. Lord, you are the most compassionate and the most merciful. It's Surah Hashr, Ayat 10. So we've run out of time, and we've also finished this right of the believer of defending him when he's being backbiting is done against him. And inshallah, we'll discuss a different topic next week. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad.